Hi guys, it's Friday again, so I guess you know what's coming. Yes, it's another episode of Fibro Friday. First of all, I just wanted to say thank you so much, everyone that has been catching up with our fundraiser. We are literally halfway through our target. Thank you so much. I really hope we make it there. Sincerely, it's been great. So thank you everyone that has been sharing, everyone that has been taking part in the fundraiser events, everyone that has been donating. You're awesome, and thank you so much. We still have a lot of time to go. We still have all of Fibromyalgia Awareness Week coming up next week. So, don't feel like you've missed up your opportunity because you haven't. And now that that is out of the way, carrying on with my tradition of Fibro Friday of keeping up and explaining to you all different bits and bobs from fibromyalgia, today I am going to talk about oversensitivity and fibromyalgia. What do I mean with oversensitivity or sensitivity? Well, as you may have heard me and other people talk about already, people with fibromyalgia have a tendency to suffer quite a perhaps not violent, but certainly enhanced reaction to drastic changes in temperature, drastic changes in light, drastic sounds, maybe drastic smells, and drastic touch as well. And that's one that is not particularly spoken about a lot, and one that a lot of people don't fully understand how it actually affects people. So I'm talking about it today because, well, that's what I do, essentially. So I will start, first of all, with how this affects me. Particularly, the one that really hits it home for me is the drastic changes in temperature. So I'll explain how this happens and why it happens, right? So fibromyalgia being a neurological condition, it means that the neurons in your brain sending the signals of what's happening in your body don't necessarily connect well. So in terms of your temperature, it's kind of like if the thermostat of your boiler at home is not working right. It may be telling you all the time that the temperature in the house is something or another, but it actually isn't. And that's very much how it is with us, right? So, for example, today, right, it's about 20 degrees in the south of England. There is a nice breeze by the sea, which means by the shade, there is a little bit of a chill, and that's it. A normal person may be able to just brush off the chill and never mind because it's still 20 degrees, it's still a reasonable temperature, at least what I'm concerned in any case. Um, but someone like me may actually struggle because the wind and the shade can actually cause the temperature sensation to feel differently, which means our body may start understanding that it's colder than it actually is, and it may start generating extra heat, which obviously in this weather is quite dangerous because it can lead us to overwork ourselves and overheat ourselves. It can be also the opposite way around. We may think that it is rather too hot, and instead what our body is trying to do is cool itself down, and then by the time we notice, we are completely freezing, and it's too late and we will take forever to actually warm up. So that is how those things happen. Obviously, the summer and the winter are the worst seasons for us with regards to drastic temperature changes, or just generally how our internal thermostat regulates itself, because obviously it's where we find the more extremes. But it doesn't have to be just a seasonal thing. I mean, it happens more obviously during seasonal changes, but it can happen in other circumstances. For example, and you may have heard me talking about this before, but when I was younger, and well, still now, I love swimming. I used to go to the swimming pool all the time. But swimming pools here in the UK have a very different approach, at least to the swimming pools that I'm used to in Spain. And the temperature in the changing rooms would always be like a sauna. Now, because of not just fibromyalgia, but my blood pressure being quite low anyway, I cannot go into saunas for medical reasons because it's guaranteed to make me drop completely, faint, dead. That's it. Not very nice. So I can't do that. I shouldn't do that anyway. But one of the reasons why it really affects people with fibromyalgia quite dramatically is because you're suddenly exposed to a lot of heat. It's not gradual, it's very sudden, and that is the key issue here, is that sudden change really sends your brain and your neurons into overdrive, and then it just has a general impact into the rest of our body. So imagine being in a swimming pool here in the UK, which are normally at around 16 to 18 degrees, right? So not terribly cold, but then the internal temperature in the changing rooms tends to be 20 plus and normally 22. is quite warm. So going from say 16 degrees to 22 degrees, that is a six is essentially a 6 degree variant in there that you've just gone from in a matter of minutes. Particularly if you have a hot shower, then you go there. It's a lot. It's a very, very drastic change in a very short period of time. So it makes it really hard for me to actually enjoy it, because I end up having to watch out for well, my temperature, and not spending too much time in there to actually be able to be safe. So it makes things really awkward. That kind of temperature change also happens when you go, for example, from the very, very cold outside and it's the dead of winter, and you come to your home and it may be 25 degrees. I mean, if you're one of those people who actually likes its house feeling like this, the Caribbean, that's also another very drastic change that can make a lot of people with fibromyalgia feel suddenly like, oh, really not well. Particularly if you've not been hydrating yourself properly too, because it may be hard for your body to regulate that internal temperature if you've not been drinking enough water, which is also the reason why you should stay very well hydrated. So that is the reason why this is actually a very tricky thing. So generally, as a rule of thumb, I always prefer to be colder than temperature appropriate, if that makes sense. It's easier for me to be on the colder side of things because I know that it gives my body a sort of window for it to regulate itself without it causing too many problems. It's easier for me to go out like this and then throw a jacket on and have a hot drink and warm up than do it the other way around. Have the jacket on, then overheat, then have to take layers off, and by the time you take the layers, it's too late. So that's usually how I operate, because it just makes my life a bit easier, and then at least I am in control of that temperature. It's not so easy with the heat, because obviously you can't really remove layers when it's too hot. But that's also a reason, like I say, why it's so important to stay hydrated, why it's so important to actually check the weather and make sure that you're prepared for heat waves and things like that, and that you eat the right stuff. So that is how the drastic changes in temperature affects people with fibromyalgia, and why it's actually quite dangerous. It also has to do with the weather itself. I know you probably have heard me say this before, but because of that, very drastic changes in the weather literally drive us crazy. I mean, there's several studies that suggest that weather that brings in pressure into the atmosphere actually affects people with other disorders, such as mental health issues like depression and anxiety, but it also affects a bunch of people that have other chronic illnesses and autoimmune disease. So it's not just us, it's not something particular. And it actually affects the human brain in general, because the atmospheric pressure has changed, and therefore your brain needs some time to adjust. And a lot of people do it without noticing, because that's what the brain is supposed to do. But some of us just don't work like that. We're not wired the right way, and it affects us a little bit more. It may also be the reason why sometimes you may feel like, for no apparent reason, you just have like a lot of pressure around your face, that sort of congestion, like that is because of atmospheric pressure. Sometimes it's the same reason why certain types of pollen affect people in a more or a lesser way. That sort of thing really, really makes a huge impact for us. So seasonal changes are absolute terrible. For me particularly is the change from winter to spring. It's the worst out of all of them because it's the more radical. I'm sure you realize that if you live in the UK, where the change from winter to spring can be quite weird, you can go from temperatures of like 8 degrees to suddenly 12 degrees really quickly. And it's not just that, it's the humidity levels can change really dramatically. If you have a really, really wet winter, and then suddenly you go to a very dry spring, or you keep on having wet, dry, wet, dry, wet, dry, all of that affects the weather. All of that, particularly during spring, it creates higher pollen levels, it creates issues with dust and whatnot. So it generally causes a lot of aggravations that throw people like us off. But it doesn't stop there. It also has an impact on how we perceive smell, light, and touch, overall the same as sounds. So this may be familiar for some people who may have some dealings with perhaps autism or ADHD. People with autism and ADHD can also have this sort of sensory overload. And it works very much the same. At the end of the day, they are neurodiverse and we are neuropathic. So there is a connection there. The neurons just don't work well, or not well, not the way they're supposed to. So the issue with these things, for example, is that we may be able to perceive certain light changes or noises, flavors, smells in a sharper way or in a more dramatic way than other people. For me, it is particularly prominent when I have a flare. I can taste certain things in a way that I know is not their normal taste, but to me that will mean, you can't eat this. It's not safe for you to eat it. It's gonna make you sick. So it's kind of like an enhanced reaction of the body. It's kind of sounds useful, but it really isn't. It's also the reason why people with fibromyalgia are a lot more prominent to migraines, because light impact has a huge affection on migraines. So we tend to be a little bit more photosensitive than other people. The first time I realized this actually was when I was visiting a museum. I was visiting, I think it was the HMS, the Warrior in Portsmouth Historic Dockyard. And obviously, when you are visiting a boat, and this happens a lot, people that visit boats or that go on yachts and stuff, you are on the deck, you have all of the natural light there, and then suddenly you go into a very dark place. And your eyes may take a while to adjust, but you normally adjust and there is no more problem. Some people like me who are sensitive to this type of things, that will result to a massive headache, a migraine, essentially. So that is how that drastic change in lighting can affect us. It's the same with touch, because our skin can be quite sensitive. I've explained this before, because of the way the messages of pain and the signaling from the body works. It's not just the pain or the fatigue, it's anything, it's any sensory input that we take. Our skin can be quite sensitive, so a little thing like that can feel really harsh when actually it may not be. That's the reason why we have a tendency to like soft fabrics better, and textiles that are naturally softer than others. But it can be with all sorts of things. It could be clothes, it could be um, washing up liquid in your clothes, it could be your own soap, things like that. They can be really abrasive. So we need to be careful with those too. In terms of flavor, like I said, is the same. There are certain chemicals that people with fibromyalgia can pick up on. They will trigger you. They will actually make you have a flare. They will make you be ill, and you will taste them. It will taste like something is chemical, and it's not a nice taste. You will be able to feel it from just the very first moment when it enters your mouth. And it's the same with smells. A lot of people get really overwhelmed sometimes when we're walking into places like, I don't know, John Lewis or big department stores where there's like a big perfume area, and you just kind of have that sort of mist of aromas. And same sometimes when people work in kitchens, it's just too much in a very sort of condensed period of time. So we have the same issue here. People with fibromyalgia may go through an area like that, and it will literally just kind of hit them on the nose, and that would be it. It will make your eyes cry, it will make you have a headache, it will make you even feel nauseous. So it can be any type of sensory input for us that happens very suddenly and with no prior forewarning. It can be absolutely devastating. Well, devastating in the sense of it's likely to trigger a flare reaction, or at least some form of reaction from our body that normally wouldn't happen. So that's how it works. That's how it affects us. And there is not an awful lot that we can do to control that specific aspect of how fibromyalgia impacts us. Normally, people have specific triggers, whether it's a scent or a type of touch or something specifically. You would be able to recognize it, that constantly it will actually give you the same reaction. But it's not so easy. With the temperature change, is relatively easy, because that kind of, like I said, is like a thermostat that you can sort of try and manipulate that from a biological point of view. But it's not a particularly easy symptom to deal with, and that's the reason why I wanted to talk about it today. Hopefully this will give you a little bit more of insight, and you will be able to at least prepare yourself for when these things happen. And on that note, it's a nice sunny day, so I hope that you're out catching some suns and enjoying yourselves, and that you have a very lovely weekend. And I'll catch you next week for Fibromyalgia Awareness Week, which is going to be awesome. So see you guys. Bye.